Amanda Canellis has a babysitter for the week. Her younger sister, 24-year-old Alicia.
Hey. Hey.
Alicia was definitely that person who would give you the shirt off her back. There's not a lot that she wouldn't do for someone that she cared about.
Thanks for doing this. Oh, I get to spoil the kids.
It was kind of all hands on deck since I was going to be gone for a number of days.
All right, you know the rules.
It was an annual work meeting in New York.
I'm serious, okay? They're all settled. Hey, Alicia.
Typically, the nanny usually only worked during the daytime, and so I needed other people to help out. Alicia loved being an auntie, and she would even request to take the kids. They had a great time with her. She had all these animals. She was such an animal lover. Dogs, chickens, a tortoise, just, you know, the list goes on and on. Her life was going really well. She had just gotten married in July to her not only high school sweetheart, these guys had known each other since elementary school. The wedding was on the beach. The sun was shining. It was exactly what she wanted, and it was perfect.
Okay, have a good flight. Bye. Bye. Love you. Love you more.
911, what is location of your emergency?
Everett, Washington. I heard two pops and it woke me up. She is lying in her own blood.
What's her name?
Alicia McGuire. I am scared to open the door.
911, what is emergency?
I don't know what happened, but there were potentially gunshots.
Did you see anything, or?
Yes. I saw them run down the driveway. They were dressed all in black.
It was a deceased female who had been shot. Silhouetted subject was seen running away. Our phones, our email, everything starts getting ringed. Sounds like, you know, like the world's ending.
All right, let's go. Snohomish County Sheriff's Department.
She's against the door.
All right, let's push on. Stand back.
They're having to make the house safe to make sure there's nobody in there that's going to hurt them or anybody else.
They had learned that there were children in the house.
They don't know what's going on. Strange people are in the homes. There's people crying. This is a horrific event.
Police call in homicide detectives Ted Betts and Eric Fagan.
What you got? Hispanic female, mid-20s, multiple gunshot wounds.
The most important thing at that point was to start following the evidence. I saw fired cartridge casings on the ground around the vehicle that was parked immediately in front of the front door. This shooter appeared to have fired from outside of the doorway. However, there were also fired cartridge casings inside the threshold of the door.
Look here. You can see some bullet strikes or defects in the door frame. We knew from the patrol briefing they had seen some bullet strikes into the banister.
There's blood on the outside of the door. Alicia's body was immediately behind the door.
There was no signs or evidence that would be consistent with the robbery. Nothing seemed to be missing or, you know, disturbed or overturned.
Because it was her sister's house, was there a possibility that this is mistaken identity? Was it supposed to be Alicia, or was it supposed to be Amanda? This was something we needed to investigate.
Detectives turn to Amanda's live-in nanny, who dialed 911 to see if she can provide any clues.
Can you tell me what happened?
She was very emotional. She had a hard time holding it together. She was upstairs when the shots rang out, and when she looked downstairs, she saw Alicia's body lying on the floor.
What can you tell us about Alicia?
Was there any problem between Alicia and her husband? Was there anything that could lead us to believe that her husband might be involved? During the course of our interview with the nanny, we learned that there were no problems between Alicia and her husband. However, there were problems between her sister, Amanda, and her estranged husband, Kevin Lewis, who did not live in that house. And that piqued our interest. There was a deputy who remembered actually responding to that address previously, and that there had been previous domestic violence incidents at that residence.
Detectives find an address for Amanda's estranged husband on the other side of Everett.
It's roughly 5 o'clock in the morning now when we're over at Kevin Lewis's home. The house seems to be fairly dark. Kevin opens the door. You know, he was wearing a white tank top, and then I also remember he had a sleep mask kind of on across his forehead.
Kevin, can we speak with you for a minute? Can you tell me where you've been tonight? At home. Sleeping.
He was home all night long, had never left the home. He didn't have any guests and visitors, and nobody was coming and going from the place.
There's been an incident at your ex-wife's house. Okay.
When they told him that there had been a shooting there in a house where his young children are, he didn't seem to be too shook up by it. That was odd.
Detectives look for any surveillance cameras that might confirm Kevin's movements that night.
We found a couple. One was right next door to Mr. Lewis's residence. Another one was just a couple houses down.
They return to the police department and wait for the CCTV to come in.
Got the footage. Let's start at about an hour before the 911 call.
Cameras affixed on the corner of the home, kind of above the front door porch area.
All right, let's fast forward a little bit. There.
We see the headlights of a car coming. That car reverses backward, just stops right at the base of Kevin's driveway.
Now, this is 1:10 in the morning, and a car just stays there.
Ten seconds go by, then 30 seconds go by. You're just looking for some sort of movement.
There, top left. Rewind. Punch in.
Now it's that 112 mark. You have a subject coming out of the door.
It is 40 minutes before Alicia is murdered.
It's a little bit dark and grainy, but you can still see some movement. It looks as if the person that's come out of the front door is wearing a white tank top. very consistent with what Kevin was wearing.
Is he getting in the car?
We couldn't say at that point that that was Mr. Lewis because the video wasn't that good, but it sure looked like Mr. Lewis.
He said he'd never left for the night. He said he never had visitors.
Why would he lie to us about that?
Punching on the car.
Detectives look for details to identify the vehicle.
You don't get to see the car in any really good detail from this camera.
Let's swap to the other camera.
It's a little bit closer to the road. This car leaving Kevin's home. It's a light color, maybe silver.
We could see general identifying features of the vehicle, but we couldn't tell exactly what kind of car it was.
Okay, I'm gonna take it back to when it arrives. Wait, look through the wheel.
The front right tire, the metal rim, is dark in color. Those other three rims, they're all light in color. So on a minimum, we now know that we have something at least slightly unique.
I'll get a bolo out. Get screen grabs out to traffic.
It was such a nondescript vehicle. It was a 1,000 to 1 shot.
They fast forward to see if the car returns later on.
Here it is.
The car returns over 20 minutes later.
It is now 1:33 a.m., 20 minutes before the 911 calls came in.
Someone who appears to be Mr. Lewis gets out of the car and walks back into the house. And then this car leaves, and we don't ever see it again. It doesn't show up on camera again.
It's about a 12 to 15 minute drive time from Kevin's house to where Amanda lives.
There was ample time for that car to have driven from Kevin's house to Amanda's house. However, the car returned before the first 911 call of a shooting at 1:53-ish. He wasn't there at the time of the shooting unless he went out the back door and got another ride, but there was no evidence of that. If he didn't go anywhere that night, then, you know, we are set back again. We don't know who else to look at.
It wasn't until several hours after she'd been killed that I learned about it.
Yeah.
I was in New York, and my dad called. He said, Amanda. And just the way he said my name, I knew something was bad. And I hear the words just like it just happened. I think about those words all the time because of how much pain my dad was in. She was planning to have a baby. Her life was going very well until it was cut short.
Back at the crime scene, investigators search for more clues.
They're taking measurements to gauge the angle in which the bullets strike objects. They're using what's called trajectory rods.
I was able to see that the trajectory rod pointed at the corner of the garage.
Someone had been hiding behind the corner there, and those appeared to be the initial shots.
There's no communication, there's no conversation. You know, the door's opening and she's being met with lead being fired out of a gun.
What it also tells us is that we're also looking for a second individual. Because if there's someone standing at the corner of the garage firing the gunshots, how in the heck did that happen without someone being there to knock on the door? The shell casings that were found outside showed that this individual had moved closer towards the doorway.
The bullet wounds on Alicia's head were fairly close range.
That shooter just reached in and was able to get the muzzle of the gun very close to the head where it, delivered a fatal shot.
That indicates a much stronger intent to kill. The science was showing us that this was a targeted attack. And there's nothing in Alicia's life that showed that she should be targeted for anything. When I looked at the fired cartridge casings at the scene, I recognized the brand. They were Talamo.
Well, hey, this isn't a very common brand, so perhaps if it's not common, we can figure out where it's sold locally. And if that's the case, then maybe if we get lucky, we figure that out, get video. Now we can find somebody buying that.
I'm just wondering if you've sold any 9mm Talamo ammo.
We found a Walmart that was not too far away, so we made a request to look for purchases of this kind of ammunition.
Well, you have. Yeah, we'll be right there.
When I got the information from the Walmart that a male had purchased some 9mm Talamo ammunition, I was excited. I was thinking, man, could it be that we got something here?
Detectives head to Walmart to view their surveillance video from the time of the purchase.
So, the 18th at 4:39. There.
Could it be we struck pay dirt and we got evidence that he was someone that purchased this stuff?
Wait. Pause right there, please.
His ammunition is being purchased.
Zoom in, right there.
Unfortunately, the quality of the video wasn't the very best.
Can we still figure out who this is, and is there some connection to anyone else that have come up in this case?
There was a card that was used So we had a name to go by. And so that was the next logical step, was to start researching that name.
Ted, I got nothing. I checked everything. There's nothing.
There was no clear connection of this gentleman to, the babysitter, to Alicia, to Amanda, to Kevin, to any of the names.
The man seen buying the ammo is no longer a suspect.
Nobody likes to strike out, but then the reality was, what other evidence do we have now?
With all other leads drying up, detectives turned to Amanda for more information on Kevin.
When I looked into the reported incidents between Kevin and Amanda, it became apparent that there was a progression of violence.
Can you tell me about your relationship with your ex-husband?
I started to see some of Kevin's controlling behavior during the honeymoon. I didn't realize that he was spiraling. The biggest injury was a laceration to my face on my eyebrow, forehead area, and you could see the bone. So after the second assault, I filed the protection order, which granted me custody of the kids. Kevin would call me regularly and try to ask me to come back home. And he said, I'm gonna take you to court and file for full custody, alimony, and child support. And if I don't get it, I'm gonna effing kill you.
Amanda, did Kevin know that you were going to be away?
All of this pointed towards a misidentification. Amanda fervently believed that she was the one who was supposed to have been there. She believed that she should have been the one who answered that door. Alicia was at the wrong place at the wrong time.
Detectives re-watched the CCTV from outside Kevin's house for any more clues he could be involved.
We don't have the information that says Kevin was involved. The video has him at his house at the time that the homicides occurred.
You can't make pieces fit that don't fit. You have to follow your evidence. We have what appear to be two provable lies. One, there was a visitor, and two, he did leave the house.
If you're lying about leaving, there's a reason. And is that reason because he showed somebody where Amanda's house was?
Take it back. There.
It looked as if he got into the rear driver's side of the vehicle. Why not get into the front passenger seat? Could there be two people in the car? Because clearly someone's driving the car away. So is it just one person? Is there two?
It fits with the ballistics evidence, which suggests that two people were involved in Alicia's shooting. Wanting to protect Amanda from Kevin, investigators begin to gather evidence on the assaults.
By November of 2018, he was found guilty of 2 different felonies, assaults upon Amanda, and he was sentenced to 3 years. But Alicia's case wasn't solved, and Amanda only has a guarantee of maybe 3 years, maybe a little less with good time. The case was getting pretty cool at that point. We hadn't seen anything that could really help us identify the car yet. There were no witnesses to identify anybody. There was nothing.
suspects?
We got 2 tips from 2 different women in Spokane who talked about a woman who was getting loose lips at some type of pool party.
Okay.
This girl was talking about having committed this homicide with another guy, and that the victim had been shot in the head. Now, the victim had been shot. That was publicized, but not where she had been shot. And that they were hired by a baby daddy.
Name given to us of the young gal that was bragging about doing the murder was Angelica Kendall.
Detectives suspect this could be a fake name.
I'm looking into the Angelica's social media accounts. There's about a dozen different platforms that I know are hers because a lot of the same photos are being used.
Ted, I think I'm onto something.
He found out just one tiny little post about Angelica's real name, Alexis Hale.
They searched through images and videos posted by Alexis around the time of the murder.
Look at this.
The pistol she was holding in these photographs was a high-point C9 pistol. We believe that's what fired the fatal bullets.
Look at this.
She is videoing someone in a mirror. So you see her pointing the camera, and he's on his phone, and he's vaping and looking at something on his phone. One of our tipsters mentioned that Alexis spoke of being with a boyfriend, and we ended up getting a name, and that name was Jared Phelps.
Wait, what's this?
On the night Alicia was murdered, Alexis took a video using her phone through the windshield of the car.
Kind of bragging about a trip or being somewhere.
Rewind a couple seconds. There. The sign.
And I was able to get a known location by the street sign.
It put them within a minute of the video from the neighbor of Kevin's house showing that car arrive.
Take a look at this.
One of the videos we got was recorded at 3:47 in the morning of September 20th. So this would have been after Alicia's murder. And this video portrayed Jaredon, named Jay, on social media with a handful of $100 bills, $20 bills, and he's fanning them in front of this camera. That was hugely important because the tipster said they were hired and paid roughly $2,000. Eric and I were able to count just a little bit more than that in Jay's hand.
With Jay, I am able to then find some stuff on Facebook. So then kind of went through some of those posts and found a photo. That picture has, 5 different comments on it. One of them comes from an aunt of Jay. And when I get into her photos, I immediately recognized that lady as Kevin Lewis's mother.
That's crazy.
When we finally made the connection that he turned out to be Kevin Lewis's cousin, it was just a jaw-dropping moment. We got photos of Jay's car from Google Earth. His car was parked in front of his residence when the Google car drove by, but it had this odd wheel. Holy smokes, that is Jay's car.
We have enough now to make an arrest in this case.
When the time came to make the arrest, being out of our own jurisdiction, we got to reach out to the local municipalities and the sheriff's office, get additional resources. You got to figure out, who you want to go arrest first.
Investigators find an address for Alexis, 300 miles away in Spokane.
We chose Alexis because I felt that being a juvenile, she'd already run her mouth once, she might do it again.
Get off of me! Get off!
There was some screaming going on. You can't arrest me. I'm a juvenile. You can't do this. She was very tight-lipped and immediately asked to speak with her attorney.
She clearly knew what we were there for and why, and then really just shut down, became very cold.
With Alexis refusing to talk, detectives tracked down Jaredon at an address an hour south of Everett.
It was important to have him tell me who hired him, who put him up to this. We had already dealt with Alexis. She gave us nothing. So our only shot was going to be with Jay.
You've got a long life ahead of you. You're in trouble right now, but how much is going to be up to you. I've been in your social media. I know a lot of things that you don't know that I know. I know about the money. I know about you flashing the money. So I know about all that stuff. And I know who got you into it, but I need you to voice it to me.
I mean, it seems like you got a pretty good story put together. You know what you're talking about.
Okay. Who was the person that put you up to this?
Yeah, I just don't know how much me telling you what you don't already know, it's not gonna help me.
If a person is not wanting to be honest, if they're not wanting to provide any information, then the legal system is going to be less likely to offer you any kind of leniency.
Well, I'm offering different ways for him to tell me, and I was getting nowhere with him.
When did you realize that the person that you were hired to kill was not the person that you killed?
Wait, what?
When did you realize that the person that you were hired to kill was not the person that you actually killed?
I didn't realize.
The person you were hired to kill was not home that night. Her sister was babysitting the kids. If I were to put out a picture of the person who led you into this, would you be willing to pick them out? No? Okay, that's fine.
There was nothing that was helping us. I was striking out.
You find a family member and you set them up to do this while you sit at home. And then the likelihood of them getting caught is pretty high. He set you up. Straight up, set you up. Don't cover for him. It hurts you. That's my advice. You know and I know we're talking about the same person, don't we? Let's get out in the open. What's his name? Why won't you give me his name? Because that's the honesty part I want out of you.
If we both know who it is, what difference does it make?
Now, if you don't want to tell me his name, that's fine. I'm not going to hit you up for it anymore.
His name is Kevin.
I was dumbstruck. I was thinking, that didn't actually work, did it? I knew that this was going to be a pivotal moment where he's going to start giving up more information. Jaredon agreed to go back to the scene with us in my truck, and Eric recorded him as he was speaking to me.
When I initially took Kevin here, he just showed me where the house was, and I turned around and I was taking him back to his home.
Okay, so now when you come back,
wow,
where did you park?
Right there, sir.
He really was able to, on scene, dial in some of those details even more.
Now, when you, where you were standing, you see the numbers on the corner there? Yeah. Were you standing about in that area there?
Yep, right there.
Okay. When Lexi knocked on the door,
Yep.
how far did the door get open?
It wasn't very far. She peeked her head out, and as Lexi was walking towards us, her back was to the door, the woman was looking at Lexi, and then I came around the corner, and it took her maybe, I want to say by the third or fourth shot, I felt like I was shooting the door. She closed the door, and then I opened it back up, and then I think I let 2 more off, and then I want to say she closed the door again.
You just run at that point?
I ran.
The trajectory rods, the measurements, the autopsy, and all of the shell casings that were found at the scene, everything matched up almost exactly.
The following day, Eric and I went to the Snohomish County Jail, and we saw Kevin. And I told him that we were investigating Alicia's death, and I asked him if he wanted to talk to us about it. He didn't want to talk to us.
We know everything.
We had Jay's picture. That sent a bolt of lightning down his spine, but he wasn't going to show that to us.
Detectives finally have enough evidence to charge Kevin Lewis with Alicia's murder.
We had Jared Phelps testifying on our behalf. We had all of the social media evidence. We had the surveillance video. We had everything that we needed to prove it at trial.
In 2020, Jared Phelps and Alexis Hale plead guilty to first-degree murder. Jared is sentenced to 31.5 years. Alexis receives 15 years. In 2022, Kevin Lewis is found guilty of first-degree aggravated murder and conspiracy to commit murder. He is sentenced to life.
This case will never leave my memory to my dying day. The video evidence in this case was hugely important.
It helps police piece together the events leading up to Alicia's murder. Jared and Alexis drive from Spokane to Kevin's house in Everett. Kevin then shows them where Amanda lives and pays them to kill her.
After having gone on a reconnaissance trip with Kevin Lewis and taken him back home, they returned and they approached to the door of Amanda's house. And while Jay is hiding around the corner, Alexis knocks on the door.
Hello? Excuse me, where are you?
She was shot several times, and she still shut the door. She just used every last bit of her dying, her last breath to try to protect the kids. I miss her laugh. It was unique and infectious. I miss arguing with her about ridiculous things. Her and her husband would have been amazing parents together. I'm sad that she didn't get the opportunity to be a mom and to have those experiences. I found a message that my sister had sent me not too long before that, and she said, "I'll do anything to protect my family." And she did.
There are certain assumptions people make about safety, especially in places that seem removed from the chaos of the world. Islands, in particular, carry an unspoken promise of distance, of separation from the dangers that define larger, more crowded cities. In Hawaii, that sense of distance is part of its identity, a place where geography itself appears to act as a barrier, where threats feel contained not only by law but by the very edges of the land. It is this quiet confidence, this belief in natural and institutional boundaries, that makes what happened in 2017 so deeply unsettling, because it revealed that containment is never absolute and that the systems built to protect can fail in ways that are both silent and profound. The name Randall Saito was not unfamiliar to the authorities who were responsible for monitoring individuals considered dangerous. Years earlier, he had been convicted of a serious act of violence, a crime severe enough to permanently define how the system would treat him. But unlike many others who commit such crimes, Saito was not placed behind the walls of a traditional prison. Instead, he existed within a different kind of boundary, one shaped not only by law but by medical judgment, a system that sought to contain him not just physically but psychologically. It was a system built on a difficult premise that treatment could coexist with security, that a person capable of violence could be managed within a framework designed for care. For years, that system appeared to hold. Saito remained within institutional control, monitored, evaluated, and restricted in ways that were meant to ensure that the past did not repeat itself. To those outside the system, his existence faded into abstraction, another case file, another individual whose story had already reached its conclusion. There was a quiet assumption that the outcome had been decided, that whatever danger once existed had been neutralized by containment. It is often in these moments, when a case is no longer actively discussed, that the illusion of permanence takes hold, the belief that what has been controlled will remain controlled. But control, as it turns out, is not a fixed state. It is a condition that must be maintained continuously, dependent on procedures, on vigilance, and on the flawless execution of systems that are, by nature, designed and operated by humans. And humans, no matter how structured their systems may be, are capable of oversight, of error, of moments where routine replaces attention. It is within these moments that the strongest structures can begin to weaken, not through dramatic failure, but through subtle gaps that go unnoticed until they are no longer gaps, but openings. In 2017, one of those openings became impossible to ignore. It did not announce itself with violence or chaos, but with absence. Saito was no longer where he was supposed to be. A man who had been under control, under observation, and under restriction was suddenly unaccounted for. The realization did not arrive all at once, but rather as a gradual recognition that something fundamental had gone wrong. A system designed to prevent exactly this outcome had failed, and the failure was not theoretical, it was immediate, tangible, and deeply consequential. The moment of discovery carried with it a kind of disbelief that is difficult to articulate. Systems that are relied upon for safety are rarely questioned until they break, and when they do, the initial response is often confusion rather than clarity. How does someone like Saito simply disappear? How does a person considered dangerous move beyond layers of supervision without immediate detection? These questions do not have simple answers, and in the early stages, they are not even fully formed. They exist as fragments, as reactions to a reality that feels incompatible with the assumptions that preceded it. As the reality settled, the implications began to expand outward. This was not just about one individual leaving a controlled environment. It was about what that departure represented. A boundary had been crossed, not by force, but by failure. The distinction matters, because it suggests that the system itself, rather than being overpowered, had allowed the breach to occur. This is the kind of failure that is more difficult to confront, because it cannot be attributed to a single moment of confrontation or resistance. Instead, it points to a series of conditions, decisions, and processes that, when combined, created an opportunity where none should have existed. The response from authorities was immediate, but urgency does not erase the underlying problem. Alerts were issued, warnings were communicated, and the search began. Yet, even as these actions unfolded, they existed within a framework that had already been compromised. The focus shifted rapidly from containment to recovery, from prevention to response. It is a transition that carries with it an implicit acknowledgement that something irreversible has occurred. Once a person like Saito is no longer contained, the situation changes fundamentally, and every subsequent action is shaped by that change. For the public, the awareness of the escape introduced a different kind of tension, one that is not defined by a specific threat, but by uncertainty. There is no clear timeline, no defined location, no immediate way to measure the risk. Instead, there is a knowledge that someone capable of serious violence is no longer within the system designed to manage that risk. This knowledge does not remain confined to official statements or reports. It spreads through communities, through conversations, through the subtle shifts in behavior that occur when safety is no longer assumed. What makes this situation particularly unsettling is the contrast between expectation and reality. The expectation is that individuals who pose a significant risk are held within environments that are specifically designed to prevent escape. These environments are structured, monitored, and regulated with the understanding that failure is not an option. The reality, however, demonstrated that even within such structures, failure is possible. And when it occurs, it exposes not only the immediate vulnerability, but the broader question of how many other vulnerabilities may exist beneath the surface. At the center of all of this is a single, persistent question that resists easy resolution. How does a system built to balance treatment and security respond when that balance collapses? The case of Randall Saito forces this question into focus, not as an abstract concept, but as a lived reality. It challenges the assumption that safety can be guaranteed through structure alone, and it highlights the complexity of managing individuals whose needs exist at the intersection of mental health and criminal responsibility. The escape is not just an event, but a moment of reckoning, one that reveals the fragility of systems that must operate without margin for error. It is a reminder that control is not a permanent state, that vigilance must be constant, and that the consequences of failure extend far beyond the immediate circumstances. As the search begins and the investigation unfolds, the story does not simply move forward. It deepens, drawing attention not only to what has happened, but to the conditions that made it possible. And in that deepening, the case begins to take on a different weight. It is no longer just about a man who escaped, but about the system that allowed him to do so, and the people who must now confront the reality of that failure. The questions raised in this moment do not disappear with time. They persist, shaping how the case is understood, and influencing how similar situations are approached in the future. In this way, the escape of Randall Saito becomes more than a single incident. It becomes a lens through which the limits of control, the complexity of responsibility, and the uncertainty of safety are brought into sharp and lasting focus. To understand how the escape of Randall Saito could provoke such a profound reaction, it is necessary to step back and examine the context that shaped both his case and the system that held him. This is not a story that begins in 2017, nor is it defined solely by the moment of disappearance. Its roots stretch back to the 1990s, to a time when a violent act altered the course of a life and set into motion a chain of decisions that would eventually place one individual at the center of a complex and uneasy balance between justice and treatment. That balance, carefully constructed over years, would later reveal itself to be far more fragile than it appeared. In the 1990s, Saito was convicted in connection with a serious act of murder. The details that mattered most within the system were not only the severity of the crime, but the conclusions drawn about the person who committed it. Courts are tasked with more than determining guilt. They must also decide how a person is to be held accountable, and in some cases, that decision extends beyond punishment into the realm of mental health. In Saito's case, the conclusion was clear enough to shape his entire future. He was not directed into the traditional prison system. Instead, he was placed into psychiatric care, a decision that reflected a belief that his actions were influenced by significant psychological factors that required treatment rather than conventional incarceration. This decision is one of the most important elements in understanding the case, because it represents a divergence from the standard path. Most individuals convicted of serious violent crimes are placed into correctional facilities where the primary goal is containment and punishment. In contrast, the psychiatric system operates on a dual mandate. It must contain individuals who may pose a danger, but it must also provide care aimed at addressing the underlying conditions that contributed to their actions. This dual mandate is inherently complex, requiring a careful calibration of security and treatment that must be maintained continuously over time. The facility in which Saito was held was part of this system, a controlled environment designed to manage individuals who could not safely exist without supervision. Within such a setting, routines are established, restrictions are enforced, and behavior is monitored with the intention of preventing harm. The structure is meant to be both protective and corrective, creating a space where risk is minimized while treatment is pursued. From the outside, this structure can appear stable, even reassuring. It suggests that the individual inside is no longer a threat to the broader public, that whatever risk once existed has been contained within a system specifically designed to manage it. Yet this perception depends entirely on trust. The public must trust that the system is functioning as intended, that the controls in place are sufficient, and that those responsible for oversight are capable of maintaining them. This trust is not built on direct observation, but on the assumption that the institutions involved are operating effectively. In many cases, that assumption goes unchallenged because there is no visible reason to question it. Individuals like Saito exist within the system largely out of sight, their presence acknowledged only in records and internal processes rather than in public awareness. Over time, this distance can create a sense of detachment. The individual becomes less a person and more a category, a case that has been resolved through placement rather than ongoing concern. For Saito, this meant that his existence was defined by routine, by the daily structures of a system that had already determined how he would be managed. The initial crime, while still part of his identity within the system, became less immediate, overshadowed by the ongoing process of treatment and containment. This shift is not unusual in long-term cases, where the passage of time changes how both individuals and institutions perceive risk. However, the passage of time does not eliminate risk. It only alters how it is perceived and managed. In systems that rely on routine, there is always the possibility that familiarity can lead to complacency, that procedures followed repeatedly may lose some of their urgency. This is not a deliberate failure, but a gradual process in which the extraordinary becomes ordinary and the need for constant vigilance becomes harder to sustain. Within the context of psychiatric care, where the goal is not only to restrict but also to rehabilitate, this tension is particularly pronounced. The system must maintain strict control while also allowing for the possibility of progress, a balance that is difficult to achieve without introducing potential points of vulnerability. The environment in Hawaii adds another layer to this context. As a geographically isolated location, Hawaii often carries the perception of being self-contained, a place where movement is naturally limited by the surrounding ocean. This perception can extend into assumptions about security, reinforcing the idea that individuals within controlled systems are even less likely to escape or disappear. The reality, however, is that geographic isolation does not replace the need for effective internal controls. It may reduce certain risks, but it does not eliminate the fundamental requirement for vigilance within the systems themselves. Within this broader framework, Saito's case represents a convergence of multiple factors. A serious crime in the past, a legal decision that prioritized treatment, a system designed to manage risk through structured care, and a context in which both physical and institutional boundaries were assumed to be sufficient. Each of these elements contributed to a situation that appeared stable on the surface, but which depended on the continuous and precise functioning of every component. The stability was real, but it was conditional, reliant on the absence of error and the maintenance of strict procedural integrity. What makes this context particularly important is that it sets the stage for what would later occur. Without understanding the system that held Saito, it is impossible to fully grasp the significance of his escape. The event itself is not simply a breach of security, it is a disruption of a carefully constructed balance, a moment in which the assumptions underlying the system are tested and found to be incomplete. The context reveals that the system was not inherently flawed in its intent, but that its effectiveness depended on factors that could not be guaranteed indefinitely. At the human level, This context also reflects a broader tension within society's approach to crime and mental health. There is an ongoing effort to reconcile the need for accountability with the recognition that some individuals require treatment rather than punishment. This effort is shaped by evolving understanding, by legal standards, and by ethical considerations that resist simple solutions. Sato's placement within a psychiatric facility is a direct result of this effort, a decision that reflects a belief in the possibility of managing risk through care rather than confinement alone. Yet this belief carries with it an inherent uncertainty. It assumes that systems can be designed to handle individuals whose behavior has already demonstrated a capacity for violence, that with the right structures in place, that capacity can be controlled. The context of Sato's case shows how that assumption is put into practice, how it is translated into policies, procedures, and environments intended to maintain safety. It also reveals how dependent that assumption is on the consistent and effective operation of those systems. As the narrative moves forward, this context remains essential. It frames every subsequent event, providing the background against which the escape must be understood. Without it, the incident might appear as an isolated failure. With it, the incident becomes something more complex, a reflection of the challenges inherent in managing risk within systems that must serve multiple, sometimes conflicting purposes. It is within this tension that the story of Randall Saito truly begins to take shape, not as a single event, but as the outcome of a long and intricate process that was always more fragile than it seemed. By the time 2017 arrived, the case of Randall Saito had long settled into what appeared to be a stable equilibrium. Years had passed since his original conviction in the 1990s, and his presence within a psychiatric facility had become part of a routine that few outside the system ever considered in detail. Within that controlled environment, the mechanisms of supervision, treatment, and restriction were expected to function continuously, quietly maintaining a balance between safety and care. There were no public indications that this balance was under strain, no visible signs that the structure itself was at risk of failure. To those who relied on the system, the assumption was simple and deeply ingrained. Individuals classified as dangerous, particularly those with a history of violent crime, remained contained. The incident that disrupted this assumption did not begin with chaos or confrontation. There was no immediate spectacle, no dramatic event that drew attention in real time. Instead, it began in a way that is often more difficult to detect, through a subtle breakdown in the continuity of oversight. At some point during the routine management of patients within the facility, something changed. The processes that had functioned as intended for years failed to produce the expected result. A presence that should have been accounted for was no longer confirmed, and in that absence, the first indication of a larger problem emerged. The exact moment of realization is less defined by a single discovery and more by a sequence of recognition. Staff operating within structured environments depend on predictable patterns, on the ability to verify that individuals are where they are supposed to be at specific times. When that verification fails, the initial response is often to check again, to confirm whether the discrepancy is a minor oversight or something more significant. In this case, the discrepancy did not resolve itself. Each attempt to confirm Sato's presence reinforced the same conclusion. He was no longer under control. What had been a routine process transformed into a critical situation, not through escalation, but through the absence of resolution. The implications of that realization unfolded quickly. A patient who had been classified as dangerous, whose history included a serious act of violence, had moved beyond the boundaries designed to contain him. This was not a theoretical possibility but a confirmed fact, and with that confirmation came a cascade of consequences. The system that had been trusted to maintain control was now confronted with the reality that it had failed at its most fundamental function. Containment had been breached, and the individual at the center of that breach was no longer within reach. The circumstances of the escape, as understood within the available information, point to a failure that occurred within the process of managing the patient. There was no indication of an external force overwhelming the system, no suggestion of a dramatic confrontation that could explain the breach as an isolated anomaly. Instead, the escape occurred within the existing framework, during the normal course of supervision. This detail is crucial because it shifts the focus away from extraordinary events and toward the integrity of routine operations. It suggests that the vulnerability was embedded within the system itself, within the procedures and controls that were expected to function without exception. Once the escape was recognized, the situation entered a new phase defined by urgency and uncertainty. The immediate priority shifted from maintaining control to re-establishing it, from preventing risk to responding to it. Authorities were notified, and the internal realization of the breach became a matter of public concern. In Hawaii, where the perception of safety is closely tied to both geography and governance, the knowledge that a convicted killer was no longer contained introduced a level of tension that extended beyond the immediate context of the facility. The transition from internal awareness to public alert marked a critical turning point. What had begun as a procedural failure within a controlled environment became a broader issue of public safety. Alerts were issued to inform the community, not with specific details of location or movement, but with the essential fact that Saito was unaccounted for and considered dangerous. This type of communication carries a particular weight because it provides information without resolution. It informs without reassuring, leaving individuals to process the implications in the absence of clear guidance on where the risk might manifest. As the information spread, the nature of the incident became more defined in public perception. It was no longer simply an escape, but a failure of a system that had been trusted to prevent exactly this outcome. The questions that emerged were immediate and difficult to answer. How had this been allowed to happen? What mechanisms had failed? And why had those failures not been detected earlier? These questions were not limited to authorities or analysts. They became part of a broader public discourse, reflecting a collective attempt to understand how a situation that seemed so unlikely could become reality. At the same time, the absence of concrete information about Saito's whereabouts introduced a different kind of tension. In cases where a suspect's location is known, even if the situation is dangerous, there is a framework for response. Resources can be directed, areas can be secured, and strategies can be developed based on specific information. In this instance, however, the lack of such information created a diffuse sense of risk. The threat was not localized but undefined, existing as a possibility rather than a certainty. This uncertainty is one of the most challenging aspects of incidents like this, because it resists containment in the same way that the individual himself had resisted containment. Within the facility where the escape occurred, the incident also represented a moment of internal reckoning. Systems that operate on precision are forced to confront their own limitations when that precision fails. Every procedure, every checkpoint, every assumption about control becomes subject to scrutiny. The realization that a breach has occurred is not only about the immediate consequences, but about the underlying processes that allowed it to happen. This introspection is necessary, but it does not immediately resolve the external situation. While the system examines itself, the individual who has escaped remains beyond its reach. The broader narrative of the incident is defined by this dual reality. On one hand, there is the immediate and urgent effort to locate Saito, to restore the control that has been lost. On the other, there is the growing awareness that the incident reflects something deeper, a vulnerability within a system that was designed to operate without such failures. These two dimensions unfold simultaneously, shaping how the incident is understood both in the moment and in retrospect. What makes this stage of the case particularly significant is that it represents a point of transition. Before the escape, Saito's case existed within the confines of a controlled environment, managed and contained in ways that limited its impact on the broader public. After the escape, it became something else entirely, a case defined not by its containment, but by its absence of it. The shift is both practical and symbolic, marking the moment when a system's internal processes become a matter of external consequence. As the search begins and the investigation moves forward, the incident itself remains the central reference point. It is the moment when assumptions are tested, when systems are forced to reveal their limitations, and when the balance between control and vulnerability becomes impossible to ignore. In this sense, the escape of Randall Saito is not just an event within a larger narrative. It is the point at which that narrative changes direction, moving from stability to uncertainty, from containment to exposure, and from confidence to questioning. The moment it became clear that Randall Saito was no longer under institutional control, the situation shifted from a contained administrative failure to a full-scale public safety concern. What had initially been recognized within the confines of a psychiatric facility quickly expanded into a broader operation that required coordination, urgency, and a level of response typically reserved for high-risk fugitives. The transition was immediate, but the clarity that often accompanies such transitions was notably absent. There was no clear direction, no confirmed location, and no reliable indication of where Saito had gone after leaving the facility. This absence of information defined the early phase of the investigation, shaping both its strategy and its limitations. Authorities in Hawaii responded by initiating a search effort designed to locate and apprehend an individual who, by definition, was considered dangerous. The classification was not based on speculation but on established history, a prior conviction for a serious act of violence that had already placed Saito within a system of strict supervision. Now, without that supervision, the same factors that had justified his confinement became the basis for urgency in locating him. The search was not merely procedural, it carried the weight of preventing potential harm, even though the exact nature or likelihood of that harm could not be clearly defined. The initial challenge facing investigators was the lack of immediate leads. In many cases, the early hours following an escape are critical, providing opportunities to track movement, identify patterns, or gather witness information. In this instance, however, the escape did not produce a clear trail. There were no widely reported sightings, no confirmed direction of travel, and no immediate evidence that could anchor the search to a specific location. This lack of tangible information forced investigators to operate within a framework of uncertainty, relying on general principles of search strategy rather than case-specific intelligence. As the search expanded, the role of communication became increasingly important. Authorities issued alerts to inform the public of the situation, emphasizing the need for awareness without creating unnecessary panic. This balance is difficult to achieve, particularly in cases involving individuals with a history of violence. The message needed to convey seriousness without speculation, urgency without exaggeration. For the public, the information was both essential and unsettling. It provided confirmation that a potentially dangerous individual was at large, but it did not offer the kind of detail that could make the situation feel contained or predictable. The investigation also began to reveal the structural challenges inherent in cases of this nature. Unlike traditional escapes from correctional facilities, where security protocols are heavily focused on physical containment, psychiatric facilities operate under a different set of priorities. While security is still a critical component, it exists alongside the need for treatment and interaction, creating an environment that is less rigidly controlled in certain respects. This difference does not imply negligence, but it does introduce additional variables that must be managed carefully. When those variables are not fully controlled, they can create opportunities for breaches that are difficult to anticipate. As these realities became more apparent, the focus of the investigation extended beyond locating Saito to understanding how the escape had occurred in the first place. This internal examination was not separate from the search effort, but rather an integral part of it. Identifying the point of failure could provide insights into possible escape routes, timing, and vulnerabilities that might still be relevant. At the same time, this process introduced a level of scrutiny that affected both institutional confidence and public perception. The question was no longer only where Saito was, but how he had been able to leave in the first place. Within this dual focus, investigators faced a complex set of priorities. On one hand, there was the immediate need to locate and apprehend an individual who posed a potential risk. On the other, there was the longer-term necessity of ensuring that the system responsible for his containment could prevent similar incidents in the future. These priorities are interconnected but not identical, requiring different approaches and different types of analysis. The search effort demanded speed and adaptability, while the internal review required precision and accountability. The absence of clear leads continued to shape the trajectory of the investigation. Without specific information to guide them, authorities had to consider a wide range of possibilities. Could Saito have remained within a limited geographic area, or had he moved beyond it? Was he acting alone, or could he have received assistance? Each possibility carried different implications for how the search should be conducted, yet none could be confirmed with certainty. This ambiguity is one of the defining challenges of cases involving escaped individuals, particularly when the initial breach occurs without immediate detection. Public awareness of the situation introduced another layer of complexity. As information circulated, so did concern, creating an environment in which individuals were more alert but also more uncertain. Reports of potential sightings, whether accurate or not, can become part of the investigative process, requiring verification and sometimes diverting resources. While such reports can be valuable, they also illustrate how the lack of confirmed information can lead to a proliferation of possibilities that must be carefully managed. At the institutional level, the escape prompted a reassessment of procedures and protocols. Every aspect of the system that had been involved in Sato's supervision became subject to review. This included not only the specific circumstances of the escape, but also the broader framework within which those circumstances occurred. Were the existing safeguards sufficient? Were there gaps in communication or coordination? These questions are essential for understanding how the incident happened, but they also highlight the inherent difficulty of creating a system that can account for every possible variable. The investigation, therefore, operated on multiple levels simultaneously. It was a search for a missing individual, a response to a public safety concern, and an examination of systemic vulnerability. Each of these levels influenced the others, creating a dynamic in which progress in one area could inform or complicate another. This interconnectedness is characteristic of complex cases, where the boundaries between different aspects of the investigation are not clearly defined. As time passed without immediate resolution, the nature of the case began to shift. The urgency remained, but it was accompanied by a growing recognition that the situation might not be resolved quickly. This transition from immediate response to sustained investigation requires a different kind of approach, one that balances persistence with adaptability. It also reinforces the importance of maintaining public awareness without allowing concern to escalate into panic. Throughout this phase, the central challenge remained unchanged. An individual with a known history of violence was no longer within the system designed to contain him, and there was no definitive information about his location. Every action taken by authorities was shaped by this reality, as they worked to reduce uncertainty and restore control. At the same time, the investigation continued to reveal the broader implications of the escape, demonstrating how a single failure can expose the complexities and limitations of systems that are otherwise designed to operate with precision. In this way, the investigation and its turning points are not defined by a single breakthrough or moment of clarity, but by the ongoing effort to navigate uncertainty. Each step forward is measured not only by what is discovered, but by how effectively the unknown is managed. The search for Randall Saito thus becomes more than a pursuit of an individual. It becomes an exploration of how systems respond when their most critical assumptions are challenged, and how they adapt in the face of a reality that does not conform to expectations. The legal dimension of the case surrounding Randall Saito does not unfold in a straightforward or a linear manner, because by the time the events of 2017 take place, the traditional process of trial and sentencing has already occurred. The system had already made its most consequential decision decades earlier, when it determined how Saito would be held accountable for a serious act of murder committed in the 1990s. That decision, to place him within a psychiatric treatment framework rather than a conventional prison, becomes the foundation upon which all later developments rest. When the escape occurs, it does not initiate a new legal process in the usual sense, but instead forces a re-examination of the original framework and the responsibilities embedded within it. At the time of his conviction, the legal system faced a question that extends beyond the determination of guilt. It had to decide not only whether Saito was responsible for the crime, but how that responsibility should be expressed in terms of custody and control. The conclusion that he required psychiatric treatment indicates that the court recognized a significant psychological dimension to his actions. This recognition is not uncommon in cases where mental health plays a role, but it introduces a level of complexity that distinguishes such cases from those handled entirely within the correctional system. The legal outcome, therefore, was not simply a sentence, but a placement within a specialized structure designed to address both risk and treatment. This placement created a shared responsibility between legal and medical institutions. The legal system established the framework within which Saito would be held, while the medical system assumed the day-to-day responsibility for managing him. This division of roles is central to understanding the implications of the escape because it highlights the interconnected nature of the systems involved. The court's decision did not eliminate the need for security. It transferred the context in which that security would be maintained. The psychiatric facility became both a place of treatment and a point of containment, operating under expectations that were shaped by legal judgment as much as by medical practice. When Saito escaped in 2017, the legal implications were immediate but not entirely straightforward. There was no new trial, no immediate courtroom proceeding that could resolve the situation in the way that criminal cases are typically resolved. Instead, the focus shifted to accountability and responsibility within the existing framework. The question was not whether Saito had committed a crime, as that had already been established, but how a person under legal and institutional control could have left that control without authorization. This question does not have a single answer because it touches on multiple layers of responsibility that extend across different parts of the system. One of the key issues raised by the escape is the extent to which the legal system can rely on institutional structures to fulfill its mandates. When a court places an individual in a psychiatric facility, it does so with the expectation that the facility will maintain control consistent with the level of risk associated with that individual. This expectation is not informal. It is an essential component of the legal decision itself. If the facility fails to meet that expectation, the consequences are not limited to operational concerns. They raise broader questions about whether the legal system can effectively delegate such responsibilities and what safeguards are necessary to ensure that delegation does not compromise public safety. At the same time, the medical system operates under its own set of principles and constraints. Psychiatric care is not designed solely around containment, but around treatment, evaluation, and the possibility of improvement. This creates an inherent tension between the goals of security and the goals of care. In a correctional setting, security is the primary objective and all other considerations are secondary. In a psychiatric setting, security must coexist with treatment, and this coexistence can introduce complexities that are not present in more rigidly controlled environments. The legal system's reliance on this model reflects a recognition of the importance of mental health, but it also requires a level of confidence in the system's ability to manage risk effectively. The escape of Saito forces this tension into the open. It demonstrates that the balance between treatment and security is not guaranteed, and that when it fails, the consequences extend beyond the institution itself. The legal system is compelled to confront the possibility that its reliance on psychiatric containment may not always provide the level of control that is assumed. This does not necessarily invalidate the model, but it does highlight the need for continuous evaluation and, potentially, for additional safeguards to address situations involving individuals classified as high risk. Another important aspect of the legal outcome is the absence of immediate resolution following the escape. In many criminal cases, the legal process moves toward a definitive conclusion, whether through conviction, acquittal, or sentencing. In this case, however, the escape introduces a period of uncertainty that does not align with the typical structure of legal proceedings. The individual at the center of the case is no longer within the system, and until he is located, the legal process cannot fully re-engage. This creates a situation in which the case exists in a kind of suspended state, where the existing legal framework remains in place, but its practical application is temporarily disrupted. This suspension also affects how responsibility is perceived and addressed. Without a clear resolution, attention turns to the processes that led to the escape and the potential need for reform. Investigations into procedural failures become part of the broader legal and institutional response, even though they may not take place within a courtroom. These investigations are essential for understanding how the system functioned and where it may have fallen short, but they operate in a different space than traditional legal proceedings. They are focused on prevention and accountability rather than adjudication. The broader legal implications of the case extend beyond the specific circumstances of Sato's escape. They touch on fundamental questions about how society manages individuals who are both legally responsible for serious crimes and in need of psychiatric treatment. The balance between these considerations is not static. It evolves over time as legal standards, medical knowledge, and societal expectations change. Cases like this one contribute to that evolution by highlighting areas where existing frameworks may need to be reassessed. In Hawaii, the impact of the case is particularly significant because it challenges assumptions about the effectiveness of systems that are often taken for granted. The legal system's decision to place Saito in psychiatric care was based on an understanding of both his condition and the capabilities of the institution. The escape calls that understanding into question, not in a way that provides immediate answers, but in a way that demands further examination. It underscores the reality that legal decisions are only as effective as the systems that implement them, and that those systems must be continually evaluated to ensure that they meet the expectations placed upon them. Ultimately, the legal outcome of the case is defined less by a single event and more by an ongoing process of reflection and reassessment. The original conviction remains a central element, establishing the basis for Sato's placement and the responsibilities associated with it. The escape, however, introduces a new dimension, one that shifts the focus from the individual's actions to the system's performance. In doing so, it transforms the case into a broader examination of how legal and medical institutions interact, how responsibilities are distributed, and how failures are understood and addressed when they occur. This transformation is not immediate or easily resolved. It unfolds over time, as the implications of the escape continue to be considered and as the systems involved respond to the challenges it presents. The case becomes a point of reference not only for what happened, but for what it reveals about the complexities of managing risk within a framework that must accommodate both justice and care. In this sense, the legal dimension of the Randall Saito case remains active, not because of ongoing courtroom proceedings, but because of the questions it raises and the need to address them in a way that ensures both accountability and safety. In the aftermath of the escape of Randall Saito, the immediate urgency of the search gradually gave way to a longer, more complex process of reflection, one that extended beyond the boundaries of a single case and into the broader structure of how systems understand responsibility, risk, and failure. The incident did not conclude neatly, nor did it offer the kind of resolution that allows a community to return quickly to a sense of normalcy. Instead, it lingered, shaping perceptions and prompting questions that could not be answered with simple conclusions. The absence of closure became, in itself, a defining feature of the case, reinforcing the idea that some events continue to exert influence long after their most visible moments have passed. Within Hawaii, the impact was both immediate and enduring. The knowledge that a convicted killer had been able to leave a controlled psychiatric environment introduced a level of unease that was difficult to contain. This unease was not tied to a specific location or event, but to the realization that a system designed to provide safety had revealed a significant vulnerability. For many, the incident altered the way institutional assurances were perceived, replacing confidence with a more cautious and questioning outlook. Trust, once assumed, became something that required reaffirmation, something that could no longer be taken for granted without scrutiny. The social dimension of this shift is subtle, but significant. Communities often rely on an implicit agreement that certain threats are managed by systems operating beyond direct observation. When those systems fail, even in a single instance, the effect is not limited to the immediate circumstances. It extends into daily life, influencing how individuals interpret information, how they respond to uncertainty, and how they evaluate the structures that are meant to protect them. In this way, the escape of Saito became more than an isolated incident. It became a reference point, a moment that redefined the boundaries of what people believed was possible within their own environment. At the institutional level, the aftermath required a careful and sustained response. The failure that allowed the escape could not be addressed through a single corrective measure. It demanded a comprehensive examination of procedures, protocols, and assumptions that had previously been considered sufficient. This process is inherently complex because it involves not only identifying specific points of breakdown, but also understanding how those points are connected within a larger system. The goal is not merely to correct what went wrong, but to anticipate how similar failures might occur in the future and to prevent them before they happen. This kind of systemic reflection often reveals tensions that are not easily resolved. In the case of psychiatric facilities, the tension between treatment and security becomes particularly pronounced. These institutions are not designed solely as places of confinement. They are intended to provide care, to address underlying conditions, and to offer the possibility of improvement. At the same time, they are responsible for managing individuals who may pose a significant risk. Balancing these objectives requires a level of precision that is difficult to maintain consistently, especially over long periods. The escape of Saito underscores how fragile that balance can be and how quickly it can be disrupted when even a small part of the system fails. The ethical dimension of this balance is equally important. Societies that prioritize both justice and compassion must find ways to accommodate individuals whose actions are influenced by mental health conditions. The decision to place Saito in a psychiatric facility rather than a traditional prison reflects this commitment. It acknowledges that punishment alone may not address the underlying issues that contribute to certain behaviors. However, this commitment also carries responsibilities, particularly the responsibility to ensure that public safety is not compromised in the process. When an incident like this occurs, it forces a reevaluation of how those responsibilities are defined and how they are fulfilled. One of the most challenging aspects of the aftermath is the absence of clear answers. Unlike cases that conclude with a definitive resolution, this situation leaves many questions open. How exactly did the system fail at the moment it mattered most? Were there warning signs that were overlooked, or was the failure the result of unpredictable circumstances? These questions are difficult to answer definitively, and in some cases, they may never be fully resolved. Yet the process of asking them is essential because it drives the kind of analysis that can lead to improvement, even if it does not provide complete clarity. The case also contributes to a broader understanding of risk within institutional systems. Risk is often managed through a combination of policies, procedures, and oversight mechanisms that are designed to reduce the likelihood of adverse events. However, no system can eliminate risk entirely. The challenge lies in minimizing it to a level that is considered acceptable, while remaining aware that the possibility of failure always exists. The escape of Saito serves as a reminder that even well-structured systems can experience breakdowns, and that the consequences of those breakdowns can be far-reaching. In the years following the incident, the case continues to be referenced in discussions about how to improve the management of high-risk individuals within psychiatric settings. It is not treated as an isolated anomaly, but as an example of the kinds of challenges that arise when systems must operate at the intersection of competing priorities. These discussions often focus on practical measures, such as enhancing security protocols, improving communication, and strengthening oversight. At the same time, they also address more fundamental questions about how to design systems that are resilient enough to handle complexity without becoming overly restrictive. The impact of the case is not limited to institutions or policymakers. It also affects how individuals understand the relationship between safety and uncertainty. The realization that systems can fail introduces a level of unpredictability that is difficult to reconcile with the desire for stability. Yet this unpredictability is an inherent part of complex systems, and acknowledging it is a necessary step toward managing it effectively. In this sense, the aftermath of the case is not only about addressing a specific failure, but about developing a more nuanced understanding of how safety is constructed and maintained. Ultimately, the story of Randall Saito does not end with his escape. It continues in the questions that remain, in the changes that are considered, and in the ways that institutions and communities adapt in response to what has occurred. It is a story that resists closure, not because it lacks significance, but because its significance extends beyond a single conclusion. It challenges assumptions, exposes vulnerabilities, and compels those who encounter it to think more deeply about the systems they rely on and the responsibilities those systems carry. In this way, the case becomes a lasting point of reflection. It reminds us that safety is not a static condition, but an ongoing process that requires constant attention and adaptation. It highlights the importance of recognizing both the strengths and the limitations of the systems we create, and of being willing to confront those limitations when they become apparent. And perhaps most importantly, it underscores the idea that even in the absence of clear answers, there is value in continuing to ask questions, to seek understanding, and to strive for a balance that, while never perfect, is always worth pursuing. As time continues to pass after the escape of Randall Saito, the case enters a phase that is less visible but no less significant, a phase in which its meaning is shaped not by immediate events, but by sustained interpretation. In this stage, the narrative is no longer driven by the urgency of search efforts or the shock of institutional failure. Instead, it becomes embedded within broader discussions about how complex systems function over time, how they adapt to failure, and how they incorporate unresolved incidents into their ongoing structure. The case does not fade into obscurity, but it changes form, becoming a reference point rather than an active crisis. This transformation is characteristic of incidents that resist clear resolution. Without a definitive conclusion, the case remains open in a conceptual sense, even if its immediate operational phase has diminished. It continues to exist within institutional memory, within professional discourse, and within the collective awareness of those who study or are affected by such events. In Hawaii, where the impact of the escape was deeply felt, this persistence is particularly evident. The case becomes part of a larger narrative about safety, responsibility, and the limits of control, influencing how future situations are understood and managed. One of the most important aspects of this stage is the way in which the case is used to examine systemic resilience. Resilience, in this context, refers to the ability of a system to respond to failure in a way that not only addresses the immediate problem but also strengthens the system against future challenges. The escape of Saito provides a concrete example of a failure that tests this resilience. It reveals how systems react when their most critical assumptions are challenged and how they attempt to restore confidence in the aftermath. This process is not instantaneous. It unfolds over time through adjustments in policy, changes in procedure, and shifts in how risk is assessed and managed. At the same time, the case highlights the inherent difficulty of achieving complete resilience. Systems designed to manage high-risk individuals must operate under conditions of uncertainty, where not all variables can be predicted or controlled. Even the most carefully designed procedures can be undermined by unforeseen circumstances or by subtle breakdowns in execution. The lesson here is not that resilience is unattainable, but that it is always provisional, always dependent on continuous effort and adaptation. The case of Randall Saito illustrates this reality with clarity, showing how a single failure can expose the limits of even well-established systems. Another dimension of this stage is the evolving understanding of accountability. In the immediate aftermath of the escape, attention is often focused on identifying specific points of failure and assigning responsibility accordingly. Over time, however, the concept of accountability becomes more nuanced. It expands to include not only individual actions, but also structural conditions, institutional cultures, and systemic assumptions. The question is no longer simply who is responsible for the failure, but how the system as a whole contributed to it and how it can be adjusted to prevent similar outcomes in the future. This broader perspective on accountability is essential for meaningful improvement, but it also complicates the process of resolution. When responsibility is distributed across multiple levels, it becomes more difficult to isolate a single cause or to implement a single corrective measure. Instead, the response must be multifaceted, addressing both specific vulnerabilities and the broader context in which they exist. This approach requires a level of coordination and reflection that extends beyond immediate operational concerns, involving policymakers, practitioners, and analysts in a shared effort to understand and address the implications of the case. The case also contributes to an ongoing dialogue about the role of mental health within the criminal justice system. The decision to place Saito in a psychiatric facility rather than a traditional prison reflects a commitment to addressing the psychological dimensions of criminal behavior. This commitment is grounded in both legal principles and ethical considerations, recognizing that effective management of certain individuals requires more than punishment alone. However, the escape raises questions about how this commitment can be balanced with the need to ensure public safety, particularly in cases involving individuals with a history of serious violence. These questions do not have simple answers, and they are not unique to this case. They are part of a broader challenge faced by societies that seek to integrate mental health considerations into their approach to criminal justice. The case of Saito serves as a focal point for this challenge, illustrating both the potential benefits and the risks associated with such integration. It underscores the importance of developing systems that are capable of addressing complex needs without compromising on essential safeguards, a task that requires ongoing attention and refinement. In addition to its institutional and legal implications, the case also has a lasting impact on how individuals perceive risk and safety. The realization that a person who is believed to be securely contained could escape introduces a level of uncertainty that is difficult to fully resolve. This uncertainty does not necessarily lead to sustained fear, but it does alter the baseline from which people assess their environment. It becomes a reminder that safety is not absolute, that it is constructed through systems that must be continually maintained and evaluated. Over time, this awareness can lead to a more critical engagement with the structures that govern safety. Individuals may become more attentive to how these structures operate, more willing to question their effectiveness, and more aware of the complexities involved in managing risk. In this sense, the case contributes to a form of collective learning, one that extends beyond the specifics of the incident to encompass broader principles about how systems function and how they can be improved. The persistence of the case within analytical and institutional frameworks also reflects its value as a teaching tool. It is used to illustrate the challenges of managing high-risk individuals, the importance of procedural integrity, and the consequences of systemic failure. These lessons are not abstract. They are grounded in a real event, with real implications, making them more immediate and impactful than purely theoretical discussions. As such, the case continues to inform training, policy development, and research, ensuring that its significance is not lost over time. Ultimately, this stage of the narrative is defined by continuity rather than closure. The case does not end in the conventional sense, because the questions it raises remain relevant and unresolved. It continues to evolve as new perspectives are applied, as systems change, and as the broader context in which it exists shifts. This ongoing evolution is what gives the case its enduring significance, allowing it to remain a point of reference for understanding the complexities of risk, responsibility, and institutional design. In this extended reflection, the escape of Randall Saito is no longer viewed solely as an isolated failure. It is understood as part of a larger pattern, a moment that reveals underlying dynamics and prompts a deeper examination of how systems operate. It challenges assumptions, encourages critical thinking, and highlights the need for continuous improvement in the face of uncertainty. Through this lens, the case becomes more than a story of what happened. It becomes a framework for understanding how such events can be interpreted, learned from, and integrated into the ongoing effort to create systems that are both effective and resilient. In the extended arc of reflection that follows the escape of Randall Saito, the case begins to take on a form that is less about immediate consequences and more about enduring interpretation. It becomes a point of convergence for multiple lines of inquiry, each examining a different aspect of how systems respond to failure and how those responses shape future expectations. At this stage, the narrative is no longer anchored solely in what occurred, but in how that occurrence continues to influence thinking, policy, and perception over time. The absence of a definitive resolution allows the case to remain open in a conceptual sense, continually revisited as new perspectives and frameworks emerge. One of the most significant aspects of this ongoing reflection is the way in which the case highlights the limits of predictability within complex systems. Systems designed to manage high-risk individuals operate on the assumption that behavior can be anticipated to a certain degree, that risks can be identified and mitigated through structured processes. However, the escape of Saito demonstrates that these assumptions are not absolute. Even when systems are carefully designed and consistently applied, there remains an element of uncertainty that cannot be entirely eliminated. This uncertainty is not a flaw in itself, but a characteristic of any system that deals with human behavior, particularly behavior shaped by psychological factors. In Hawaii, the implications of this uncertainty extend beyond institutional settings into the broader social context. The case serves as a reminder that safety is not a static condition guaranteed by geography or infrastructure, but a dynamic process that requires continuous attention and adaptation. For communities, this realization can lead to a more nuanced understanding of risk, one that acknowledges both the strengths and the limitations of the systems in place. It encourages a perspective that is neither complacent nor alarmist, but attentive to the complexities that define real-world situations. At the institutional level, the case contributes to an evolving conversation about how to design systems that are both flexible and secure. Flexibility is necessary to accommodate the diverse needs of individuals within psychiatric care, to allow for treatment and evaluation that cannot be reduced to rigid protocols. Security, on the other hand, requires consistency and control, ensuring that individuals who pose a risk are effectively managed. Balancing these two requirements is a central challenge, and the case of Saito illustrates how difficult that balance can be to maintain over time. It suggests that achieving this balance is not a one-time effort, but an ongoing process that must be continually reassessed in light of new information and changing conditions. The case also underscores the importance of transparency in maintaining public trust. When systems fail, the way in which those failures are communicated and addressed plays a crucial role in shaping public perception. Transparency does not eliminate the impact of the failure, but it can influence how that impact is understood and managed. In situations where information is limited or unclear, uncertainty can grow, leading to speculation and a sense of instability. By contrast, clear and consistent communication can help to contextualize the failure, providing a framework within which it can be examined and addressed. Another dimension of the case that becomes more apparent over time is its role in shaping professional practice. For those working within the fields of law enforcement, mental health, and institutional management, the case provides a concrete example of the challenges associated with managing high-risk individuals. It highlights the need for coordination between different sectors, the importance of maintaining procedural integrity, and the potential consequences of even small lapses in oversight. These lessons are not confined to the specific circumstances of the case, but are applicable to a wide range of situations in which similar dynamics are present. At the same time, the case invites a deeper consideration of the ethical questions that arise when managing individuals who exist at the intersection of mental health and criminal responsibility. The decision to prioritize treatment reflects a commitment to addressing the underlying factors that contribute to behavior, but it also requires a willingness to accept certain risks. Determining how much risk is acceptable and how it should be managed is a complex and often contested issue. The escape of Saito brings this issue into sharp focus, illustrating the potential consequences when the balance between treatment and security is disrupted. The persistence of the case in analytical discourse also reflects its value as a point of comparison. It is used alongside other cases to identify patterns, to explore similarities and differences, and to develop a more comprehensive understanding of how systems function under stress. This comparative approach allows for a more nuanced analysis, one that moves beyond isolated incidents to consider broader trends and underlying principles. In this context, the case of Randall Saito becomes part of a larger body of knowledge, contributing to a collective effort to improve how such situations are handled. As this process of analysis continues, the case also reveals the importance of adaptability in system design. No system can anticipate every possible scenario, and the ability to respond effectively to unexpected events is a key component of resilience. This adaptability requires not only technical adjustments, but also a willingness to reevaluate assumptions and to implement changes that may challenge established practices. The case demonstrates that adaptability is not simply a reactive quality, but a proactive one, involving continuous monitoring and a readiness to adjust as conditions evolve. The human dimension of the case remains present throughout the stage, even as the focus shifts toward systems and structures. The individuals affected by the incident, whether directly or indirectly, continue to experience its impact in ways that are not always visible in formal analyses. This includes not only those within institutional settings, but also members of the broader community who must reconcile their expectations of safety with the reality of uncertainty. Recognizing this human dimension is essential for maintaining a balanced perspective, one that acknowledges both the technical and emotional aspects of such cases. Ultimately, the extended reflection on the Randall Saito case highlights the interconnected nature of the issues it raises. It is not solely a matter of security, or treatment, or legal responsibility, but a combination of all these elements, each influencing the others in complex ways. The case serves as a reminder that addressing one aspect in isolation is rarely sufficient, and that effective solutions require a holistic approach that considers the full range of factors involved. In its final analytical form, the case does not offer closure in the traditional sense. Instead, it provides a framework for ongoing inquiry, encouraging those who engage with it to think critically about how systems are designed, how they function, and how they can be improved. It emphasizes the importance of vigilance, adaptability, and a willingness to confront difficult questions without expecting simple answers. Through this lens, the escape of Randall Saito becomes more than a singular event. It becomes a continuing exploration of how societies manage risk, balance competing priorities, and strive to create systems that are capable of responding to the complexities of the real world. In the longest view of the case surrounding Randall Saito, the narrative evolves into something that extends beyond chronology and into the realm of institutional memory and collective interpretation. By this stage, the events themselves are no longer the only focus. Instead, attention turns to how those events are preserved, retold, and integrated into the systems that were once directly challenged by them. The case becomes less about a sequence of actions and more about a sustained presence within the frameworks that seek to understand and manage risk. It is here that the story takes on a different kind of permanence, one that does not rely on resolution but on continued relevance. Within Hawaii, the case has already shifted from an immediate concern to a reference point, a moment that continues to inform how institutions approach similar situations. This shift does not diminish its importance. On the contrary, it reinforces it, ensuring that the lessons drawn from the incident remain active in shaping future decisions. The escape is no longer viewed solely as an isolated failure, but as an example of how systems can be tested under conditions that expose their limitations. This perspective allows the case to function as a guide, not in the sense of providing definitive answers, but in illustrating the kinds of challenges that must be anticipated and addressed. One of the most significant aspects of this stage is the way in which the case contributes to the development of institutional awareness. Awareness, in this context, is not simply the recognition that a failure occurred, but an understanding of how that failure fits into a broader pattern of potential vulnerabilities. It involves identifying the conditions under which similar incidents might arise and considering how those conditions can be mitigated. This process requires a level of reflection that goes beyond immediate response, incorporating insights from multiple disciplines and perspectives. The case also highlights the importance of continuity in learning. Systems that experience failure must find ways to retain the knowledge gained from that experience, ensuring that it is not lost over time or diluted by changing priorities. This continuity is often achieved through documentation, training, and the incorporation of lessons into policy and procedure. In the case of Randall Saito, the persistence of the narrative within professional discourse suggests that such continuity is being maintained, allowing the case to continue influencing how similar situations are approached. At the same time, the case underscores the challenges associated with maintaining this continuity. As time passes, the immediacy of the event fades, and the sense of urgency that accompanied it can diminish. Without deliberate effort, the lessons learned may become less prominent, overshadowed by new concerns or changing contexts. This dynamic is not unique to this case, but it is particularly relevant in situations where the absence of resolution can make it more difficult to sustain attention. The ongoing relevance of the case depends on the ability of institutions and individuals to recognize its significance and to integrate its lessons into their ongoing practices. Another important dimension of this stage is the role of interpretation. As the case is revisited over time, it is viewed through different lenses, each shaped by the perspectives and priorities of those engaging with it. For some, the focus may be on the technical aspects of the escape, examining the specific points of failure and the procedural adjustments that followed. For others, the emphasis may be on the broader implications for mental health policy, legal responsibility, or public safety. These different interpretations do not contradict each other, but they highlight the multifaceted nature of the case and the range of issues it encompasses. This multiplicity of perspectives contributes to the case's enduring significance, allowing it to remain relevant across different contexts and disciplines. It also reflects the complexity of the issues involved, demonstrating that no single framework is sufficient to fully capture the implications of the event. Instead, the case must be understood as a convergence of factors, each interacting with the others in ways that are not always immediately apparent. This complexity is what makes the case both challenging and valuable as a subject of analysis. The ethical considerations that emerged earlier in the narrative continue to play a role in this stage of reflection. The balance between treatment and security remains a central concern, one that is not easily resolved but must be continually negotiated. The case of Randall Saito serves as a reminder that decisions made within this balance have far-reaching consequences, affecting not only the individuals directly involved, but also the broader community. It reinforces the need for careful consideration of how these decisions are made and how their outcomes are managed. In addition to its ethical and institutional implications, the case also contributes to a deeper understanding of how uncertainty is managed within complex systems. Uncertainty is an inherent part of any system that deals with human behavior, particularly when that behavior is influenced by psychological factors. The escape of Saito illustrates how uncertainty can manifest in ways that challenge existing frameworks, requiring systems to adapt and respond in real time. It also highlights the importance of developing strategies that can accommodate uncertainty without compromising essential safeguards. As the case continues to be examined, it also raises questions about the nature of closure in situations where definitive answers may never be available. Closure is often associated with resolution, with the idea that a case can be concluded in a way that provides clarity and finality. In this instance, however, closure remains elusive, replaced by an ongoing process of reflection and adaptation. This does not diminish the importance of the case, but it does change how it is understood, emphasizing its role as a continuing source of insight rather than a completed narrative. The persistence of the case within collective awareness also reflects its impact on how individuals and institutions perceive their own roles and responsibilities. It serves as a reminder that systems are not infallible, that they require constant attention and adjustment to function effectively. This awareness can lead to a more proactive approach to risk management, encouraging the identification and mitigation of potential vulnerabilities before they result in failure. It also reinforces the importance of accountability, not only in responding to incidents, but in maintaining the integrity of systems over time. Ultimately, the extended reflection on the Randall Saito case reveals the depth and complexity of its influence. It is not confined to a single moment or a single set of circumstances, but extends into multiple domains, each shaped by the questions it raises and the lessons it provides. The case becomes a part of an ongoing conversation about how to balance competing priorities, how to manage risk in uncertain environments, and how to learn from failure in a way that leads to meaningful improvement. In this final stage of analysis, the case stands as a testament to the enduring relevance of unresolved events. It demonstrates that even in the absence of clear answers, there is value in continued examination, in the willingness to engage with complexity and to seek understanding in situations that resist simple explanation. Through this process, the story of Randall Saito remains active, not as a closed chapter, but as a continuing exploration of the challenges and responsibilities that define the systems we rely on to maintain safety and order. As the narrative surrounding Randall Saito continues to unfold in its most extended form, it becomes increasingly clear that the case cannot be confined to a single dimension of analysis. It exists simultaneously as a historical event, an institutional challenge, and a continuing subject of reflection that evolves as new perspectives are applied. At this stage, the focus is no longer on reconstructing what happened or even on understanding why it happened in a narrow sense. Instead, the emphasis shifts toward examining how the case continues to shape thinking, influence systems, and inform the broader understanding of risk, responsibility, and control. Within Hawaii, the case has already become part of an ongoing dialogue about the nature of safety and the mechanisms that support it. This dialogue is not static, nor is it confined to the specific circumstances of the escape. It extends into considerations of how institutions operate under pressure, how they adapt to failure, and how they incorporate the lessons of past events into their future practices. The escape of Saito serves as a reference point within this dialogue, a moment that encapsulates the challenges of managing individuals who exist at the intersection of criminal justice and mental health systems. One of the most significant aspects of this extended analysis is the recognition that systems are defined as much by their limitations as by their capabilities. The structures designed to manage high-risk individuals are often evaluated based on their success in preventing adverse outcomes. However, cases like this one highlight the importance of understanding how systems behave when those outcomes do occur. The failure of containment is not simply an absence of success. It is an event that reveals underlying dynamics, exposing areas where assumptions may not align with reality. This exposure is not inherently negative, but it requires a willingness to engage with complexity and to address issues that may not have been fully anticipated. The case also illustrates the role of time in shaping understanding. In the immediate aftermath of the escape, the focus is necessarily on response and containment, on addressing the situation as it unfolds. As time passes, however, the perspective broadens, allowing for a more comprehensive examination of the factors involved. This temporal shift is essential for developing a deeper understanding of the case, as it provides the space needed to analyze not only the event itself, but also the context in which it occurred and the implications that extend beyond it. The passage of time does not diminish the importance of the case, but it changes the way in which that importance is expressed and understood. Another important dimension of this stage is the interaction between different systems and the challenges associated with coordinating their efforts. The case of Randall Saito involves both legal and medical frameworks, each with its own objectives, constraints, and modes of operation. The legal system is primarily concerned with accountability and public safety, while the medical system focuses on treatment and rehabilitation. These objectives are not mutually exclusive, but they can create tension when applied to the same individual. The escape highlights how this tension can manifest in practical terms, demonstrating the need for clear communication, shared standards, and coordinated approaches that ensure both objectives are effectively addressed. The concept of shared responsibility becomes particularly relevant in this context. When multiple systems are involved in managing a case, responsibility is distributed across different levels and functions. This distribution can enhance the overall capacity to manage complex situations, but it can also create challenges in identifying and addressing points of failure. The case underscores the importance of clearly defining roles and responsibilities, as well as ensuring that mechanisms are in place to monitor and evaluate how those responsibilities are carried out. Without such mechanisms, the risk of gaps in oversight increases, potentially leading to outcomes that neither system is fully equipped to handle on its own. In addition to its institutional implications, the case also contributes to a broader understanding of how individuals and communities respond to uncertainty. The escape introduces a level of unpredictability that challenges the perception of safety as a stable condition. This challenge does not necessarily lead to lasting fear, but it does encourage a more critical engagement with the systems that underpin everyday life. Individuals may become more aware of the complexities involved in maintaining safety, more attentive to the ways in which systems operate, and more prepared to question assumptions that might otherwise go unexamined. The case also serves as a reminder of the importance of adaptability in both institutional and individual contexts. Systems that are rigid in their design may struggle to respond effectively to unexpected events, while those that incorporate flexibility are better equipped to adjust and recover. This adaptability is not only a matter of procedure but also of mindset, requiring a willingness to learn from experience and to implement changes that reflect that learning. The escape of Saito provides a clear example of why such adaptability is necessary, illustrating how even well-established systems must evolve in response to new challenges. As the analysis continues, the case also highlights the role of ongoing evaluation in maintaining the effectiveness of complex systems. Evaluation is not a one-time process, but a continuous effort to assess performance, identify areas for improvement, and implement changes that enhance overall functionality. In the context of this case, evaluation extends beyond the immediate circumstances of the escape to include broader considerations of how similar situations might be prevented in the future. This forward-looking perspective is essential for ensuring that the lessons of the case are not only understood but also applied in meaningful ways. The enduring significance of the case is also reflected in its ability to generate discussion and inquiry across multiple domains. It is not limited to a single field or perspective but engages with issues related to law, medicine, ethics, and public policy. This multidisciplinary relevance underscores the complexity of the challenges involved and the need for collaborative approaches to addressing them. It also ensures that the case remains a subject of interest and analysis, contributing to ongoing efforts to improve how similar situations are managed. Ultimately, the extended reflection on the Randall Saito case reveals the depth of its impact and the breadth of its implications. It demonstrates that cases involving complex interactions between individuals and systems cannot be fully understood through a single lens or within a limited time frame. Instead, they require sustained attention, critical analysis, and a willingness to engage with the uncertainties that define them. The case becomes a point of reference for understanding how systems function under pressure, how they respond to failure, and how they can be improved to better meet the demands placed upon them. In its final form, the narrative does not resolve into a simple conclusion. Instead, it remains open, continuing to inform and challenge those who encounter it. The story of Randall Saito is not one that ends with a definitive answer, but one that persists as a source of insight and reflection. It invites ongoing engagement, encouraging a deeper understanding of the complexities involved in balancing treatment and security, managing risk, and maintaining the systems that are relied upon to protect both individuals and communities. As the narrative surrounding Randall Saito continues to unfold in its most extended form, it becomes increasingly clear that the case cannot be confined to a single dimension of analysis. It exists simultaneously as a historical event, an institutional challenge, and a continuing subject of reflection that evolves as new perspectives are applied. At this stage, the focus is no longer on reconstructing what happened or even on understanding why it happened in a narrow sense. Instead, the emphasis shifts toward examining how the case continues to shape thinking, influence systems, and inform the broader understanding of risk, responsibility, and control. Within Hawaii, the case has already become part of an ongoing dialogue about the nature of safety and the mechanisms that support it. This dialogue is not static, nor is it confined to the specific circumstances of the escape. It extends into considerations of how institutions operate under pressure, how they adapt to failure, and how they incorporate the lessons of past events into their future practices. The escape of Saito serves as a reference point within this dialogue, a moment that encapsulates the challenges of managing individuals who exist at the intersection of criminal justice and mental health systems. One of the most significant aspects of this extended analysis is the recognition that systems are defined as much by their limitations as by their capabilities. The structures designed to manage high-risk individuals are often evaluated based on their success in preventing adverse outcomes. However, cases like this one highlight the importance of understanding how systems behave when those outcomes do occur. The failure of containment is not simply an absence of success. It is an event that reveals underlying dynamics, exposing areas where assumptions may not align with reality. This exposure is not inherently negative, but it requires a willingness to engage with complexity and to address issues that may not have been fully anticipated. The case also illustrates the role of time in shaping understanding. In the immediate aftermath of the escape, the focus is necessarily on response and containment, on addressing the situation as it unfolds. As time passes, however, the perspective broadens, allowing for a more comprehensive examination of the factors involved. This temporal shift is essential for developing a deeper understanding of the case, as it provides the space needed to analyze not only the event itself, but also the context in which it occurred and the implications that extend beyond it. The passage of time does not diminish the importance of the case, but it changes the way in which that importance is expressed and understood. Another important dimension of this stage is the interaction between different systems and the challenges associated with coordinating their efforts. The case of Randall Saito involves both legal and medical frameworks, each with its own objectives, constraints, and modes of operation. The legal system is primarily concerned with accountability and public safety, while the medical system focuses on treatment and rehabilitation. These objectives are not mutually exclusive, but they can create tension when applied to the same individual. The escape highlights how this tension can manifest in practical terms, demonstrating the need for clear communication, shared standards, and coordinated approaches that ensure both objectives are effectively addressed. The concept of shared responsibility becomes particularly relevant in this context. When multiple systems are involved in managing a case, responsibility is distributed across different levels and functions. This distribution can enhance the overall capacity to manage complex situations, but it can also create challenges in identifying and addressing points of failure. The case underscores the importance of clearly defining roles and responsibilities, as well as ensuring that mechanisms are in place to monitor and evaluate how those responsibilities are carried out. Without such mechanisms, the risk of gaps in oversight increases, potentially leading to outcomes that neither system is fully equipped to handle on its own. In addition to its institutional implications, the case also contributes to a broader understanding of how individuals and communities respond to uncertainty. The escape introduces a level of unpredictability that challenges the perception of safety as a stable condition. This challenge does not necessarily lead to lasting fear, but it does encourage a more critical engagement with the systems that underpin everyday life. Individuals may become more aware of the complexities involved in maintaining safety, more attentive to the ways in which systems operate, and more prepared to question assumptions that might otherwise go unexamined. The case also serves as a reminder of the importance of adaptability in both institutional and individual contexts. Systems that are rigid in their design may struggle to respond effectively to unexpected events, while those that incorporate flexibility are better equipped to adjust and recover. This adaptability is not only a matter of procedure but also of mindset, requiring a willingness to learn from experience and to implement changes that reflect that learning. The escape of Saito provides a clear example of why such adaptability is necessary, illustrating how even well-established systems must evolve in response to new challenges. As the analysis continues, the case also highlights the role of ongoing evaluation in maintaining the effectiveness of complex systems. Evaluation is not a one-time process, but a continuous effort to assess performance, identify areas for improvement, and implement changes that enhance overall functionality. In the context of this case, evaluation extends beyond the immediate circumstances of the escape to include broader considerations of how similar situations might be prevented in the future. This forward-looking perspective is essential for ensuring that the lessons of the case are not only understood but also applied in meaningful ways. The enduring significance of the case is also reflected in its ability to generate discussion and inquiry across multiple domains. It is not limited to a single field or perspective but engages with issues related to law, medicine, ethics, and public policy. This multidisciplinary relevance underscores the complexity of the challenges involved and the need for collaborative approaches to addressing them. It also ensures that the case remains a subject of interest and analysis, contributing to ongoing efforts to improve how similar situations are managed. Ultimately, the extended reflection on the Randall Saito case reveals the depth of its impact and the breadth of its implications. It demonstrates that cases involving complex interactions between individuals and systems cannot be fully understood through a single lens or within a limited time frame. Instead, they require sustained attention, critical analysis, and a willingness to engage with the uncertainties that define them. The case becomes a point of reference for understanding how systems function under pressure, how they respond to failure, and how they can be improved to better meet the demands placed upon them. In its final form, the narrative does not resolve into a simple conclusion. Instead, it remains open, continuing to inform and challenge those who encounter it. The story of Randall Saito is not one that ends with a definitive answer, but one that persists as a source of insight and reflection. It invites ongoing engagement, encouraging a deeper understanding of the complexities involved in balancing treatment and security, managing risk, and maintaining the systems that are relied upon to protect both individuals and communities. In the continuing evolution of the case surrounding Randall Saito, the narrative reaches a stage where its significance is no longer tied to any single outcome or unresolved question, but instead to the enduring influence it exerts across multiple layers of understanding. At this point, the case exists as a sustained presence within institutional thought, a reference that is revisited not because it demands immediate answers, but because it continues to offer insight into the nature of complex systems and the challenges inherent in managing them. It becomes less a story about a specific individual and more a framework through which broader issues are examined and understood. Within Hawaii, this stage is characterized by a quiet but persistent awareness. The urgency that once defined the case has subsided, replaced by a more reflective engagement with its implications. This does not mean that the case has lost its impact. On the contrary, its influence has deepened, becoming integrated into the way institutions and communities think about safety, responsibility, and the limits of control. The absence of a definitive resolution ensures that the case remains open to interpretation, allowing it to adapt to new contexts and to inform discussions that extend beyond its original scope. One of the defining features of this stage is the way in which the case contributes to a more nuanced understanding of systemic vulnerability. Vulnerability, in this context, is not viewed as a flaw to be eliminated entirely, but as an inherent aspect of systems that operate under conditions of complexity and uncertainty. The escape of Saito highlights how even well-designed systems can be affected by unforeseen factors, creating situations in which established safeguards are insufficient. Recognizing this vulnerability is a crucial step toward developing systems that are not only robust but also capable of adapting to changing circumstances. This recognition leads to a shift in how success and failure are defined. Rather than viewing failure as an endpoint, it becomes part of an ongoing process of learning and improvement. The case illustrates how failures can provide valuable information about the functioning of a system, revealing areas where adjustments are needed and offering opportunities to strengthen overall performance. This perspective does not diminish the seriousness of the failure, but it reframes it as a catalyst for change rather than a purely negative outcome. At the same time, the case underscores the importance of maintaining a balance between different priorities. The systems involved in managing individuals like Saito must navigate the tension between ensuring public safety and providing appropriate care. This balance is not static, and it cannot be achieved through rigid adherence to a single set of rules. Instead, it requires continuous evaluation and adjustment, taking into account new information, changing conditions, and evolving standards of practice. The case serves as a reminder that achieving this balance is an ongoing challenge, one that demands both vigilance and flexibility. The role of communication also becomes more prominent at this stage. Effective communication is essential for maintaining trust, particularly in situations where uncertainty remains. This includes not only the dissemination of information about specific incidents, but also the broader communication of how systems operate and how they are being improved. Transparency in this context is not simply about providing details, but about fostering an understanding of the processes involved and the efforts being made to address potential risks. The case of Randall Saito highlights how communication can influence public perception, shaping the way in which events are interpreted and understood. Another important aspect of this stage is the way in which the case contributes to the development of professional standards and practices. For those working within relevant fields, the case provides a concrete example of the challenges associated with managing high-risk individuals in complex environments. It informs training programs, policy development, and operational procedures, ensuring that the lessons learned are incorporated into future practice. This process of integration is essential for translating insight into action, allowing the case to have a tangible impact on how systems function. The case also raises broader questions about the nature of responsibility within interconnected systems. When multiple institutions are involved, each with its own role and perspective, determining how responsibility is distributed becomes a complex task. The escape of Saito illustrates how failures can occur at the intersections between systems, where coordination and communication are critical. Addressing these challenges requires a comprehensive approach that considers not only individual actions, but also the structures and processes that shape those actions. In addition to its institutional implications, the case continues to influence how individuals think about safety and uncertainty in their daily lives. The realization that systems can fail, even when they are designed to prevent such outcomes, introduces a level of complexity that cannot be easily resolved. This complexity encourages a more thoughtful engagement with the concept of safety, one that acknowledges both the protections provided by systems and the limitations inherent in them. It fosters a perspective that is both realistic and adaptive, recognizing that safety is an ongoing process rather than a fixed state. As the narrative continues to evolve, the case also highlights the importance of perspective in shaping understanding. Different stakeholders may interpret the case in different ways, depending on their roles, experiences, and priorities. For some, the focus may be on technical improvements and procedural changes. For others, it may be on ethical considerations or broader social implications. These varying perspectives contribute to a richer and more comprehensive understanding of the case, allowing it to serve as a point of connection between different areas of inquiry. The enduring relevance of the case is also reflected in its ability to prompt ongoing inquiry. It raises questions that do not have simple answers, encouraging those who engage with it to think critically about how systems are designed and how they function. This inquiry is not limited to the specifics of the case, but extends to broader considerations of how similar challenges might be addressed in other contexts. In this way, the case becomes a source of continuous learning, one that evolves alongside the systems it helps to inform. Ultimately, the narrative at this stage is defined by its openness. It does not conclude with a definitive statement or a final resolution, but remains active as a subject of reflection and analysis. The story of Randall Saito continues to unfold, not through new events, but through the ongoing engagement of those who seek to understand its implications. It serves as a reminder that complex cases do not end when the immediate circumstances have passed, but continue to influence thinking and practice in ways that are both subtle and profound. In this extended reflection, the case stands as an example of how systems respond to challenge and change over time. It illustrates the importance of adaptability, the value of continuous learning, and the need for a balanced approach to managing risk and responsibility. Through its persistence, it invites ongoing consideration of how to create systems that are not only effective but also resilient, capable of addressing the complexities of real-world situations with both precision and care. In the furthest extension of reflection surrounding Randall Saito, the case reaches a point where it is no longer defined by its chronology, nor by the immediate structures that once contained it, but by the enduring questions it leaves behind. These questions do not diminish with time. Instead, they deepen, gaining complexity as they are examined through new perspectives, new standards, and evolving understandings of how systems interact with the individuals they are meant to govern. The narrative becomes less about the events themselves and more about the persistent challenge of interpreting those events in a way that is both meaningful and applicable to the future. Within Hawaii, the case has transitioned fully into the realm of long-term significance. It exists not as an active crisis, but as a reference embedded in institutional memory and public awareness. This embedded presence ensures that the case continues to inform how similar situations are approached, even as the immediate details recede from everyday attention. It becomes part of a broader framework through which safety, responsibility, and systemic integrity are evaluated, influencing decisions in ways that are often subtle but nonetheless important. At this stage, one of the most prominent themes is the recognition that systems must be designed with the expectation of imperfection. The idea that a system can function without failure is not only unrealistic but potentially counterproductive, as it can lead to complacency and a lack of preparedness for unexpected events. The escape of Saito illustrates how even systems that are carefully constructed and rigorously maintained can encounter situations that challenge their effectiveness. This recognition does not undermine the value of those systems, but it emphasizes the need for continuous vigilance and adaptation. This perspective leads to a more dynamic understanding of safety, one that is not based on the absence of risk, but on the capacity to manage risk effectively as it arises. In this context, safety is not a static condition that can be achieved once and maintained indefinitely. It is an ongoing process that requires constant attention, regular evaluation, and a willingness to adjust strategies in response to changing conditions. The case serves as a reminder that maintaining safety is an active endeavor, one that depends on the interaction of multiple factors and the sustained effort of those involved. Another key aspect of this stage is the emphasis on integration. The challenges highlighted by the case cannot be addressed in isolation, as they involve the interaction of legal, medical, and institutional systems. Effective responses require a coordinated approach that brings together these different elements, ensuring that they operate in a complementary rather than conflicting manner. This integration is not always easy to achieve, as it involves reconciling different priorities, methodologies, and perspectives. However, the case demonstrates that without such integration, the risk of failure increases, as gaps and inconsistencies can emerge between systems. The concept of integration also extends to the way in which lessons are incorporated into practice. It is not enough to identify areas for improvement. Those improvements must be translated into concrete changes that are consistently applied. This requires a commitment to ongoing learning, as well as mechanisms for ensuring that knowledge is shared and retained within the system. The persistence of the Randall-Saito case within professional discourse suggests that this process is taking place, allowing the insights gained from the incident to continue influencing how similar situations are managed. At the same time, the case highlights the importance of maintaining a balance between caution and functionality. Systems that are overly restrictive in their efforts to prevent failure may become less effective in fulfilling their broader objectives, particularly in contexts that require flexibility and responsiveness. Conversely, systems that prioritize flexibility without sufficient safeguards may expose themselves to increased risk. Finding the right balance between these competing considerations is a complex task, one that requires careful analysis and ongoing adjustment. The case serves as a reminder that this balance is not fixed, but must be continually reassessed in light of new information and changing circumstances. The ethical dimensions of the case also remain central to its long-term significance. The decision to place Saito in a psychiatric facility reflects a commitment to addressing the underlying factors that contribute to certain behaviors, recognizing that punishment alone may not be sufficient in all cases. However, this commitment must be balanced with the responsibility to protect the public, particularly when dealing with individuals who have demonstrated a capacity for serious violence. The case illustrates the challenges of navigating this balance, highlighting the need for ethical frameworks that can accommodate both considerations without compromising either. In addition to its institutional and ethical implications, the case continues to shape how individuals understand the concept of accountability. Accountability is often associated with specific actions and outcomes, but in complex systems, it extends beyond individual responsibility to include the structures and processes that influence those actions. The escape of Saito underscores the importance of examining accountability at multiple levels, ensuring that both individual and systemic factors are considered in the analysis of what occurred and how it can be prevented in the future. The persistence of the case also reflects its role in fostering a culture of critical inquiry. By raising questions that do not have simple answers, it encourages ongoing engagement with the issues it presents. This engagement is essential for maintaining the relevance of a case, as it ensures that it continues to inform thinking and practice rather than becoming a static example confined to the past. The willingness to revisit and reevaluate the case is a testament to its significance, demonstrating that its value lies not only in what it reveals, but in how it continues to provoke thought and discussion. As the narrative reaches this extended stage, it becomes clear that the case does not conclude in a traditional sense. There is no final resolution that brings all questions to an end or provides a definitive interpretation of what occurred. Instead, the case remains open, its meaning shaped by the perspectives of those who engage with it and the context in which it is considered. This openness is not a limitation, but a strength, allowing the case to remain relevant and adaptable as new challenges and considerations emerge. Ultimately, the story of Randall Saito endures as a complex and multifaceted exploration of how systems operate under pressure, how they respond to failure, and how they evolve over time. It highlights the importance of recognizing both the capabilities and the limitations of the structures that are relied upon to maintain safety and order. It emphasizes the need for continuous learning, adaptability, and a willingness to confront difficult questions without expecting simple answers. Through this ongoing process of reflection, the case continues to contribute to a deeper understanding of the challenges and responsibilities that define the intersection of law, medicine, and society. In the final stretch of reflection on the case of Randall Saito, the narrative settles into a space where its true significance becomes less about the singularity of the event and more about the enduring imprint it leaves on systems, institutions, and collective understanding. By this stage, the case has moved beyond immediacy of its facts and into a deeper, almost structural presence, influencing how future decisions are shaped even when it is not explicitly referenced. It becomes part of an invisible framework, a set of lessons absorbed into practice, guiding actions in ways that are often unspoken but consistently felt. In Hawaii, this transformation is especially evident in how the case continues to inform attitudes toward institutional responsibility. The memory of what occurred does not remain static. It evolves, becoming integrated into training, policy discussions, and the everyday awareness of those tasked with managing complex systems. The escape is no longer just a past failure, but a reference embedded in operational thinking, influencing how risks are identified, how decisions are made, and how accountability is understood. It represents a shift from reactive understanding to proactive awareness, where the lessons of the past are actively used to anticipate and prevent future challenges. One of the most profound elements of this stage is the recognition that systems are defined not only by their design, but by their capacity to learn. The ability to absorb the implications of an event like this and translate them into meaningful adjustments is what ultimately determines whether a system becomes stronger or remains vulnerable. The case of Randall Saito illustrates how learning is not a passive process. It requires deliberate effort, sustained attention, and a willingness to confront uncomfortable truths about how systems operate. It demands that institutions look beyond surface-level explanations and engage with the deeper structures that shape outcomes. This process of learning also involves acknowledging the limits of control. Systems that manage individuals with complex psychological and behavioral profiles must operate with an understanding that complete predictability is unattainable. The escape underscores this reality, demonstrating that even under structured conditions, there are variables that cannot be fully accounted for. Accepting this limitation does not equate to accepting failure. Instead, it provides a foundation for developing more resilient approaches, ones that are capable of responding effectively when unexpected situations arise. At the same time, the case reinforces the importance of maintaining a human-centered perspective. While much of the analysis focuses on systems, procedures, and institutional dynamics, it is essential to remember that these structures exist to manage human lives and behaviors. The decisions made within these systems have direct consequences, not only for the individuals involved but also for the communities that rely on them for safety. The story of Randall Saito is, at its core, a reflection of how societies attempt to balance competing needs, addressing both the realities of human behavior and the expectations of collective security. Another critical aspect of this stage is the way in which the case contributes to a broader culture of accountability. Accountability, in this context, extends beyond identifying specific errors or assigning blame. It involves a continuous commitment to evaluating performance, addressing weaknesses, and ensuring that systems remain aligned with their intended purpose. The escape serves as a reminder that accountability is not a one-time response, but an ongoing responsibility, one that requires vigilance and a willingness to adapt. The persistence of the case within professional and institutional discourse also highlights its role as a catalyst for innovation. Challenges of this nature often prompt the development of new approaches, whether in the form of improved security measures, enhanced communication protocols, or more sophisticated methods of risk assessment. These innovations are not created in isolation, but are shaped by the insights gained from past experiences. In this way, the case contributes to a cycle of improvement, where each lesson learned becomes a building block for more effective systems. At the societal level, the case continues to influence how people perceive the relationship between safety and uncertainty. The knowledge that systems can fail introduces a level of complexity that cannot be easily resolved, but it also encourages a more informed and realistic understanding of how safety is maintained. This understanding does not diminish the importance of systems, but places them within a broader context, recognizing both their capabilities and their limitations. It fosters a perspective that is both cautious and constructive, one that values improvement over complacency. The case also serves as a reminder of the importance of memory in shaping future outcomes. Institutional memory, in particular, plays a crucial role in ensuring that lessons are not lost over time. By preserving the details and implications of events like this, systems are better equipped to recognize patterns, anticipate challenges, and respond effectively when similar situations arise. The continued relevance of the Randall Sido case suggests that such memory is being maintained, allowing its lessons to remain active within the frameworks that govern decision-making. As the narrative reaches this final stage, it becomes clear that the case does not conclude in a traditional sense. There is no definitive endpoint, no moment at which all questions are answered and all uncertainties resolved. Instead, the case remains open, its significance evolving as it is revisited and reinterpreted over time. This openness is not a limitation but a reflection of the complexity of the issues it encompasses. It allows the case to remain relevant, adapting to new contexts and continuing to inform the ways in which systems are understood and managed. Ultimately, the story of Randall Sido endures as a multifaceted exploration of how societies confront the challenges of managing risk, balancing competing priorities, and maintaining systems that are both effective and adaptable. It highlights the importance of continuous learning, the necessity of acknowledging limitations, and the value of approaching complex issues with both rigor and humility. Through its persistence, the case serves as a reminder that the pursuit of safety and accountability is an ongoing process, one that requires constant attention, reflection, and a willingness to evolve. In this final reflection, the case stands not as a closed chapter, but as a living example of how events can shape understanding long after they have occurred. It invites continued engagement, encouraging those who encounter it to think critically about the systems they rely on and the responsibilities those systems carry. It underscores the idea that even in the absence of clear resolution, there is meaning to be found in the process of inquiry, and that through this process, systems can continue to grow, adapt, and strive toward a more resilient and informed future.